an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Unsouled, Cradle Book 1, Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. In these chapters, we get introduced to a society that has tangible evidence of souls. This evidence can be manipulated, turned into weapons, formed into strength that gets cycled through so you don't get tired. Overall, it sounds pretty dope. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you very much to Andrew for commissioning this episode. Andrew is waiting with breath that is bated to find out if I like this first book before commissioning the others. I think that there's like 9. I think maybe 8. The 9th is coming out soon. But yeah, this is an ongoing series that is not yet finished, and I don't know how many books the author intends or if they even have an idea. The author being Will White, by the way, I should mention. And this book is available for anybody who is on the Kindle Unlimited subscription. This book is available on Kindle Unlimited to read for nothing. I don't know about the other books, if they are all also on Kindle Unlimited or what. But I got that, and I also got the audiobook as well, because I always like to have a backup in case I'm in a situation where for some reason I can't stop and read, like in the car and I get stuck in traffic, and that way I can still do my reading. And I really think that these first few chapters are a really nice establishing sequence of events. There's the start of a book and of a series is so tricky. I try to be as aware of that as I can possibly be. Whether it's a TV show or a book, you have to get so much out there for an audience or a reader to comprehend without overwhelming them, and also get them feeling invested in the actual characters themselves. And all the while, you're setting the stage for like a major plot and world building at the same time. It's just a lot. So I tend to take it pretty easy on opening chapters and opening episodes of shows, because I just, the respect I have for people who can even get this half right. I mean, it's just not easy. But I thought that this was well done. There were some times where I was kind of like, oh, okay, I think you lost me there for a second. But then a moment later, it was back, and I kind of was like, okay, no, I didn't need to know that right away, and it's fine. And there are a lot of, I'm wondering how many of the series that I have covered for Spoil Me this author has read, because it's reminding me a lot of various different ones. The first one that comes to mind, if any of you have not yet read The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, he's going to be releasing book 3 this year, I think. That is another fantasy series that feels much more Asian in flavor, which is not something that I am particularly familiar with. So I found that really refreshing, because so much fantasy is really heavy on the Western themes and being set in places that feel European. So whenever you get something that is not that, I always enjoy the difference there. So that kept kind of coming to mind here. And also, it reminded me a little bit of the way that magic works in Garth Nix's Abhorsen series, because there's a lot of writing. He calls it script. There's a lot of written spells, and it reminds me of like charter symbols. And especially at one point, there is a character who has the equivalent of a charter sending, and it is like a magically manifested servant, basically, that takes on the shape and duties that you assign it, like a piece of software. And I always think that is just a really wild idea. I really like that. So there's little things here and there that before reading the series that I have so far for Spoil Me would have felt totally foreign and different. And now I have a bit of a sense of like place, because I have other series that I've read that have similar ideas. And that is not to say that they are unoriginal ideas. I don't think originality is all it's cracked up to be. Like, it is useful, but do something good with what already exists, and I'm just as impressed. But that is to say that there are times where I can get much more caught up in the concept of something than the story. And I didn't feel that happening there. I was just as invested in the story as I was in the developments of like the different magic and its aspects. And I'm really interested to see where this goes. So the first chapter starts off with, in bold, information requested, the spiritual origin test of Sacred Valley, beginning report. And then we get chapter 1. And at the end of chapter 1, it says, suggested topic, clan culture of Sacred Valley. Continue? Denied. Report complete. So this has the feel of somebody in the far future, maybe, looking at data on a computer that tells them about the characters in this story. That's pretty interesting. That intrigues me. I want to know what that's about. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be the far future. It feels far future because of it being something that sounds like a computer, but is like, we are seeing a world that, technologically speaking, isn't super advanced. And I say technologically because I think of like mechanically, but we see that they have literal magic. So I don't know that their magic could not accomplish what our computers accomplish, or have a similar database of information to search through as a computer. And it might be magically fueled and not what I'm saying is the impression that these bolded sentences are from the future may be totally inaccurate and solely influenced by my idea of the progression of time in our universe, which might not have any bearing at all on what the hell is going on in this world. So we start off, chapter 1 is a pretty short one. And what we are establishing here is a basically rite of passage for children to find out what their souls are meant to be. And there are 4 options. You get either what they do is they dip their hand in what looks like water, but it is actually Madra, raw power of spirit, purified and distilled, the material from which souls are made. I want to know how this is gained. Like, this comes up a few times in the coming chapters, and I'm still not totally sure I get it. And that's fine. I might not be meant to get it. But I am very curious. Like, is it the same bowl the whole time? Is the bowl of Madra changed every time they do the test? Is it kept and everybody uses the exact same one for like over centuries? I don't know about that, but I'm curious. So the first girl puts her hand in, and the Madra sticks to her hand, and we find out that means that she has the soul of an enforcer, a guardian, and will use her great strength to protect the clan. And then the next one sticks his hand in, and rather than sticking to her hand, it flees away. And he is given a wooden badge marked with an arrow. And the arrow is for a striker who attacks their rivals from a distance, basically like a sniper. Scepters are for rulers who bend the power of heaven and earth, and the result of that is that the water rises, which I wish we got to see that. It just floats in midair, I guess. And then hammers for forgers, whose techniques create weapons and wealth for the clan. And that result is when the water turns to ice. So these are the 4 things that happen. And they each do sort of line up with elements in their way. So, you have the earth, air, water, fire. air and an arrow tend to go together. I could see earth lining up with the forgers and solidifying, basically. And it's just like, there's a mention a little bit later of like certain elemental remnants, they're called. And I rather like that name for them as well. It sort of makes me think of like it's like a combination of like revenant, which makes you think of something that's sort of like brought back to life in like a zombie or undead or whatever. But also remnant is just like a leftover. So it's not quite that threatening, but still gives you the impression of something alive. And I don't know, I liked that naming device. But we hear about like fire remnants and water remnants later. So I think that this is probably what's happening here. Or maybe the water fleeing away and that is like fire and that is the striker. That might mean more for them rulers who bend the powers of heaven and earth. If the water floats, that sounds more like air. And yeah, that's interesting. I wonder. Anyway, so Lindon is the name of our protagonist. And Lindon really, really wants to be a forger, which is apparently what his mother does as well. And he sticks his hand in and nothing happens. And it is the impression that you get here is that they've never seen this before, like ever. However, we find out later that there are sorts of traditions established for what to do in this situation and what symbol somebody like this gets. So it's not 100% unheard of, but it does seem to be rare enough that it happens like once every other lifetime is the vibe you get. I may be wrong and it might be slightly more, more frequent than that, but it really, the reaction that everyone has is indicative of that they have never seen this before, is the vibe that I got. I love the way this is written. Lindon knows that this shit went wrong. He knows that he has fallen outside the norm. He knows that the adults are muttering about him and looking at him like something is wrong with him. And he knows that he is being talked about like a thing all of a sudden instead of like a person. But he tries very hard to be so polite and sort of pretend that he doesn't understand, as if to lead them down a road. So when each of the badges that you get is on like a wooden hexagon, I think it is. And he is wanting to choose one and sort of like says like, can I choose one, in this way that's meant to maybe make this person who is in charge of the badges think, oh, well, if the water didn't choose you, then you get to choose your own. Like he's trying to sort of insinuate something, but also remaining really, really polite. He's not like protesting. He's not saying, well, the water's wrong, or he is trying to get what he wants within the confines of what society accepts and expects of him. And that tells you a lot right there about the kind of person he is. He is not somebody to just bust out and do his own thing and fly in the face of convention or of authority. If he eventually does that, it will be a major shift. As of right now, he is somebody who has been very strictly taught clearly to function within the rules. And I know that that is often seen with protagonists as sort of like a negative, that's something that they have to break past. And to a point it is for all of us. But I am somebody who definitely responds to authority. I am somebody who, I question everything, but if somebody who feels to have more experience or expertise than me instructs me in something, it is very much in my nature to listen to what they said and to do as they told me to do. If there is a sign up that says don't walk on the grass, I am somebody who will literally be like, what are you doing when somebody else walks on the grass? I would not only never do it myself, but somebody else does it. And I'm just like, come on, man, there's a sign right there. Why are you being a dick? Like, I relate to handling people like Lindon does in this opening section, where he just tries, like, he is a kid who is picking up the vibe in the room and trying to just make it be okay, even though it's obviously not okay. And I cannot tell you, as an only child with parents who fought all the time, how fucking familiar that is. Like, that just really, the whole introduction here tells you about the clan and their traditions, yes, but about Lindon, like, a lot. So I really like this. And they tell him that he can't have a badge, or at least the ones that are there. He can't have one of those. The first elder says, we will have a badge made for you, she Lindon, to show the world what you are. And the elder then tells Lindon's mother that you're going to need to take him away and make sure that he passes next time, because if not, he says, perhaps next time the heavens will choose to have mercy on him. And he asks his mother, why didn't I get a badge? And she says, because the heavens wish to shame us. Her voice is grim, and here Lindon learns his spirit is something shameful. Until he earns his badge, he will continue bringing shame to his clan. So he needs a badge. Now, again, indicative, one can see that he starts cheating and doing all of these things in order to try and get a badge. This is not because he wants this badge. Okay? Like, that's a really key difference here to me. He isn't trying to do this just because he wants a thing. Even though he would, like, if he were going to choose, he'd pick the Forge badge. He is willing to take whatever he can get because he is shaming people who are important to him. Again, this is all about fitting in. This is all about trying to function within the society he lives in and do what's expected of him. This isn't just him being vain and wanting a thing and just trying to take it. It is him trying to game the system so that he can just be normal and be cool like everyone else, you know? So we get a couple of different, like, one time he takes a bit of his mother's blood on the palm of his hand so that the bull will respond to that, but it's not enough. Another time he tries to use a spell that is scratched underneath the table to get it to do a thing by activating it when his hand is in the water. But they eventually, like, even though he keeps having to try, they eventually give him a badge that has a symbol in the middle. Let's see. Lindon recognizes from his mother's lessons a word in the old language. It means empty. As the other children grow, they leave behind their wooden badges. Their mastery over Madra, their skill in the sacred arts, increases day by day. The earliest among them reaches the copper stage at 9, upgrading his badge accordingly. The latest is 13. At 15, Wei Shi Lindon is the only one who still has his original badge. Still wooden, still empty. Every half a year when the children have finished their test, Lindon slips in and judges his own spirit again. Every time, he hopes the heavens will finally have mercy on him, as his mother once said. He's tried 17 times now. The water has yet to move. So, that is what we're operating on here. He got given a couple of chances to earn a badge. When it was clear it was never going to happen, they finally gave him one that says empty. And he has to go in the room to try it secretly on his own. Which is honestly, like, such a sad thing to know that everybody else kind of gave up on him. Like, and I say gave up on him in the way that he clearly interprets that. Not because, like, to me, this shows a flaw in the program, not in the kid. But he sees this, and so does everyone else, as some sort of birth defect, essentially, that this is just a freak accident and you aren't normal and you're just going to have to figure out the best you can do with the limited capacity that you have. It's interesting. It's like a disability in this world, because there are many things that everyone else takes for granted being able to do that he can't do. And it's fascinating to read because it's treated in that way. And the fact that nobody else really thinks about asking him to do certain things, or if they do, they know he won't be able to. And so it's like a specific act of cruelty to ask him to do something. The fact that he is just really not seen as like a whole human being, and that there's no ACA in his world. You know, there's nobody watching out to make sure that things are accessible to somebody who is unsouled. He's the only one that we know of, and that's his problem. The fact that they let him continue to function in their world is considered sort of like an act of mercy on their part. Like, I get the vibe that if his family decided to disown him, that maybe they would be given a pass on that. It's the kind of thing that I feel like it would be one of those that everybody would nod and wink at each other and pretend they all don't know. If there was a terrible accident and he died mysteriously, everybody would be like, oh yeah, well, you know, kid didn't have a soul, so I get it. I'm not going to say anything, you know, that kind of situation, because we find out later that his life is really worth very little. If there were to be an outright murder, his death would be barely punishable at all. And, I wonder about the effect that has had on his family's view of him, because we meet his parents a little bit later, and it is a weird assortment, his family. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's back up. Chapter 2, we go to Lindon, and he is now 15, I believe. And because it says he tried twice a year, he's tried 17 times. So I'm thinking, but maybe it's longer than that. I think it's mentioned a little bit later. Yeah, 15, because he's the 10-year-old girl he says is 5 years younger than him a little bit later. So he's looking for a tree. And we start off chapter 2 with him realizing that he has found the correct tree, and begins chiseling some runes into the wood of the tree. And, you know, later on we discover that this is a spell, and that the spell will work if he is correct about his assessment of what this tree is. So he carves in the spells. I find this fun. He has to check the notes that his mother gave him, because he doesn't know this spell by heart. This is something that she has given him as a task to do. And he's doing the best he can, but he doesn't have the education in a lot of things that other kids do, because he hasn't been assigned a position. So then we get a little bit of a primer. This is really interesting. This was the 25th tree he'd found and tested over the last 3 days, ever since his mother had found out there was a tree somewhere in the forest that was about to advance, which I am dying to know how she figured that out. The Fallen Leaf School kept a monopoly on most trees with any possibility to produce a spirit fruit, but Lindon had a chance to beat them to this one as long as he worked quickly. Plants had to live much longer to advance than animals did. If a fox or a turtle survived their first century, they would absorb enough vital aura from the world around them to ascend into sacred beasts. These animals cycled Madra, advanced in power, and left remnants just as humans did. The oldest of them could even speak, and legend said some could take human forms. Plants did the same, but it took several times as long. Some trees had to stay undisturbed for 500 years or more before they absorbed enough vital aura to develop a rudimentary spirit, and they would never learn to speak. The orris tree he was looking for had lived at least 3 centuries and was on the cusp of ascension. Centuries of vital aura concentrated in the wood would nurture its fruit, giving it a potent spiritual power. Even sacred artists at the iron or jade stage would pay a small fortune for such an advantage. For Lindon, he only dared to imagine it. This spirit fruit might strengthen him enough to make up for whatever his soul lacked at birth. So there's a bunch dropped, a lot of information dropped here. It doesn't feel hugely exposition-y, you know, we're getting information, but it's not like, I don't feel like it's inelegantly done. And what I'm hearing here is that there is a basically refinement of this life energy that happens so that you essentially sort of level up. It's like being distilled and distilled and distilled and distilled into purer and purer forms. And apparently each of these stages is given a specific name. So he says, even if you were at the iron or the jade level, which, you know, it's really wild when there, and this is something that it remains to be seen, but I always find it wild when human beings try to quantify something that is very subjective, which is something that we love to try and do because we can't resist. And I wonder how accurate these levels are and who determines if you've reached them. Because he talks about it later with his parents when they are trying to take some of this fruit. And I am wondering how this works, and I'm sure we'll find out more about it, but it's obvious that there's like some sort of test and you reach it like by competing against other people is the impression that I get. But other than that, I don't know who determines the results. Is it similar to sticking your hand in a bowl of this like life force? Is it a detached third party that is unbiased in that nature? Or is it like teachers who assess you and judge your competence? Or is it you fight against somebody of the level that you are trying to reach? And if you are able to beat them, then you have reached their level. Like, there's a million ways that this could work. But anyway, so he finishes the script and he doesn't see the result that he wanted, which was for the whole spell to glow, and then begins to walk away. And then he sees a flicker, and he looks over and realizes that it has worked. And there is a single spirit fruit hanging from like the highest branch. It says a normal orris fruit was like a pure white peach and grew only in Sacred Valley. Lindon had grown up eating them in everything from pies to juice, but it seemed the outside world considered them delicacies. They had no special properties, only a unique flavor. Fruit from an ancestral orris tree looked no different, but a bite would deliver him years' worth of purified vital aura that he could process into Madra. He wanted to claw his way up the bark, but the nearest branch was far too high to reach. He should come back with his sister, or at least a ladder, if only he could find his way back here before the fallen leaf disciples did. So, he's sitting there looking at this, trying to decide what to do, and at this moment, a snow fox goes sprinting through the clearing that he's standing in. And it freezes and sees him and stares at him for a minute. And he's just kind of staring at it because it's not really native to his area. It's something that it's a symbol of his clan specifically. So it feels like a portent, but this is like miles north of where this fox is supposed to live. And at this point, Waymon comes in. Waymon is a kid at the copper level who is a real shit and feels very Malfoy-ish. But it's only initially that he feels Malfoy-ish, because later he goes and tells the truth when asked. And that is not some shit Malfoy would do. So I had to pretty quickly reevaluate what I thought of this kid. And Waymon is after this snow fox, and we find out a little bit later that it's illegal. They have like this deal that they are not meant to hunt these foxes unless they have really specific permission. So Lindon is okay. I'm trying to get how this whole thing goes down, because basically what happens is Waymon loses his temper because Lindon causes him to lose the fox. And I guess it doesn't really matter exactly how this goes down. That's the gist. Because of course Lindon didn't know they were like in the middle of this. So his interference in this hunt was totally unintentional, but Waymon does not like Lindon. It's like unclear how much he doesn't like him legit and how much it's just, I don't respect you and see you as less than me, which, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it's an interesting, there's like this moment where you get to hear the name Whisper before you know who this is. Elder Whisper did occasionally allow the hunting of snow foxes, but only under carefully controlled conditions. He most certainly would not tolerate 3 young coppers running down a snow fox at the foot of Yoma Mountain. But even his eyes couldn't see everything. Myth said the meat of a snow fox would strengthen the madra of those following the path of the white fox, as virtually everyone in the Wei clan did. There was no logical reason it should be true as far as Lindon knew, but many believed it. So Elder Whisper had therefore banned all hunting of snow foxes without his explicit permission. And this all sounds just like he is trying to be mindful of like not killing out an entire population that represents your clan, which I think feels like just a smart idea. The idea that eating the meat of the symbol of your clan is helpful feels like a really, if it's not true, which nobody would be able to help if it just happened to be true, but if it isn't true, that feels like a really thoughtless rumor to set in motion, because you're basically like killing out the symbol of yourselves in the world, which feels, you know, just counterproductive. I don't know. So I really like this moment. This is when Lindon thinks to himself, because he calls him Terrace, by the way. I got a little bit like mixed up here, because depending on who like is speaking about somebody, they use a last name or a first name. First and middle name some people have. But we hear here that Lindon, while physically at Terrace's mercy, it would be considered like a huge dishonor to kill somebody who was below his rank. And while there's a moment where Lindon's sort of like, all right, you know what? I don't have to worry. He's not going to kill me. That would be real bad for him. Then a second later, he's like, there's nobody here to see that though. If he did kill me, there's no proving that he did that. So maybe there's not as much at risk as I thought. And this is when Terrace looks at the tree that Lindon has been searching for 3 days. And he's so pissed that he decides to exact his vengeance on the tree in order to punish Lindon for ruining his hunt. Now, I don't know. It's interesting to me that he doesn't seem to know that this tree is an elder tree. It's curious to me that he doesn't know that, because the search for these fruits, I would think that this would be like kind of a well known, that if like because it turns out a little bit later, Lindon says, you idiot, you've killed us both. That was an ancestral tree. And he says that was an ancestral tree in such a way that it feels Terrace is supposed to immediately know what that means. So if he knows the danger of blowing up a tree that is this special, You would think he would recognize the symbols and the results of those symbols for what they are, which is an indication that it is that type of tree and you better not fucking do it. But, you know, it doesn't really matter. You would just think you would know. But Lindon is making a protective circle in order to avoid the remnant that he knows is coming. It was made from lines of vivid purple, like the color sketched on the world by a celestial painter. The remnant was thin and free of details like bark or leaves, as though it were the purple skeleton of the tree that once had been. In reality, it was more like a ghost, a spirit without a vessel. Remnants were constructions of pure Madra freed from their physical bodies. Whenever a sacred artist of enough power died, he left his soul behind him as a living force. And it's just a wild thought. He thinks about how like his soul would immediately disappear. And for regular animals or copper level artists, it would also just probably dissipate. But sacred animals, ancestral trees, and humans who are iron or jade stage would I don't think he says that they leave them though, does he? Oh, no. Sacred beasts, ancestral trees are on another level altogether. It would take an iron or jade stage practitioner to face one of these spirits in combat. Right. So they don't leave a spirit like this. It's that they are the only people who would really be a match for some of these. So this remnant goes after Terrace because he is not in the circle and he's not protected. And this thing whomping willows his ass right into the dirt. Like, this thing is pissed off. And honestly, I'm here for it. I am 1,000% all about a tree that can defend itself. It's unfortunate that it seems the damage is done. The tree, in beating up this kid, will not get itself back. I guess this remnant will just walk around forever if, like, nobody was able to stop it. Oh, that's a real interesting thought. But I just really like the idea that, like, you know, a bunch of people go in to just shamelessly log an area, and here comes an army of tree ghosts to avenge their deaths. Like, yes, please. Waymon Terrace's clothes were torn where the tree remnant had struck him, but he was on his feet and stumbling away within seconds. Even in a possibly lethal situation like this one, Lindon had time for a brief flash of jealousy. A blow like that would have killed or crippled him, but Terrace must have been drawing on his Madra. So that's the first time that we see this, and it gets brought up again later when he goes to visit Whisper and he has to go down the stairs, that they're able to use this like system of cycling to increase their strength, to diminish fatigue. There's just a lot that it allows you to do physically that you wouldn't be able to do as a, like, you know, regular person or an unsouled person. So Lindon manages to protect himself from this thing using the protective circle. And he has this like little gem that he is like, it's full of Madra that apparently has taken like some weeks to cultivate. And let's see, which was key. He hated wasting weeks of his time here, but if he could restore the Orris fruit, it would be worth more than a year of cycling. Right. So this spirit of this tree has the fruit in its branches the way that the live tree had. So he figures out a way to lure the spirit toward him and grab at the fruit in its branches, because even though it is not, it's not of this earth, but it's still solid. Like, you know, the tree ghost was able to punch this kid. It's got a physical effect on the world around it. It's not like mist or something like that. So this is pretty cool. He grabs the fruit. This fucking thing manages to like break his arm. And he gets the fruit, and it's like, you know, this is the mission he was sent on. This was a big deal. And he, despite it all, manages to carry it off, despite that he doesn't have the abilities that some other people have and the tools that they have. So even though he completely like is in horrific pain and has a broken arm and has to walk like 12 miles, he is still delighted when he heads home. So then we find out that Sacred Valley has about 1 million people in it. And it says, and the Way clan alone accounted for over 100,000 of those. Even so, the one resource no one lacked was space. Each family received a generous portion of land with a small house added onto the main complex for each member. Typically, the children received their own house along with their wooden badge as a mark of independence. Even Lindon, who could contribute nothing back to the clan, received a housing allotment inferior to no one's. So I found that interesting, that even though he didn't get his badge, and even though he's like, you know, not considered a productive member of the family, they don't begrudge him having the exact same property that everybody else has, which felt like a positive to me, but we see later that the positives are not exactly outweighing the negatives at all. So he's laying in bed, and his family is in the room debating what to do with this fruit, which his mother had indeed been able to restore. And it does not even occur to any of them to give any of this fruit to him, because he is unsouled, and really, what's the point? His sister, Wei Xin, Wei Xin is his father, right. Kelsa is his sister. Wei Shi, I think it is actually, not Wei Xin. Yeah, Wei Shi. Kelsa, his sister, is described as getting everything in life that Lindon wanted. And it's the sort of thing where she is so fair and good-natured that he can't even really hate her, even though, you know, he's definitely envious and jealous, but not in a way that feels as toxic as it can get when things like this happen. She seems to be aware of the inequality between the two of them. And she doesn't act out of pity, which I found really interesting. There is never in this whole conversation any sense of her patronizing him. They eventually get to the point where she agrees to share it with him, but it feels like she's careful to say, you're the one who worked for it, and taking something from you after you put in the work is not honorable. So this is only fair. And it's a very practical, like, delivery of that line. There's nothing about that feels like her coddling him or trying to, like, make him feel better. It is about what is expected and what is the right thing to do and what is the smart thing to do, and weighing all of those. It's a very logical, and I rather like that. You know, I tend to be that way, and I think it's an effective way to avoid resentment. If you can, I mean, to a point, somebody's going to be resentful whether you like it or not, but you can do what you can to emphasize that you are aware without making it seem like you just pity and feel sorry for someone. There's a difference between acknowledging you have some strikes against you regarding what you're able to do that I don't have. You can say that without it being like, oh, that sucks. I'm really sorry. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. God, I feel so bad. You know, I appreciate it. So they talk about this conversation about who gets the fruit goes on a while, but the main thing to take in here is that his father, who used to fight and was apparently used to be pretty good, had been pretty badly injured and has not fought since then. And there's a vibe to him of really like desperately wanting those days back. It's interesting that they are able to like refresh their endurance and everything, but that he still has limps and like a scar on his face. Evidently the magic they have is not completely restorative to the degree that you just walk away from a fight like you never had it. Or maybe it is, and they simply don't choose to use it that way all the time. You know, it could be something that like you walk into certain fights knowing that whatever injuries you sustain are going to be what you keep. Like there could be all kinds of restrictions on how this is used. And I'm wondering how much somebody else's Madra can be used to help a person external to them. It seems like everybody cycles their own Madra and makes themselves like stop being tired and feel stronger and have better recovery. But if something happens, can somebody else give you some of theirs to like top you up if you're really on the edge of like death or a terrible like permanent injury? I wonder. So his sister is, let's see, Lindon's sister. I can't do well enough for the patriarch to notice us if I'm still a copper. How will I fight Wei Jin Ammon or Li Tenjana without iron strength? And Kelsa is the like stepping into this conversation in order to stop her parents fighting, which is evidently something that she tends to do all the time. She's sort of like, I don't even want to say the peacemaker. She's somebody that like gets them off of their fucking like pride tracks that they get onto. And she's the one who brings everybody back to the actual issue at hand and is like, okay, can we fucking talk about what we're here to talk about, please? And Lindon finally is the one that steps in and is just like, dude, guys, y'all three are talking about splitting this amongst yourselves. Nobody even like thinks about maybe giving me a bit. Kelsa asks her mother, can we divide it into 4? And she says, we were already taking a risk with 3. There's a limit beyond which any elixir cannot be stretched or it is wasted. His dad, and there's a different approach to everybody. His mother talks about things in a very detached sort of clinical way without seeming to want to address what it means to the people in the room. Her father is very personal. His father is like, we can't take the chance. Give it to Kelsa. It's no good to you. And is really open with what he wants and the goals that he is after. And then his sister is kind of a balance between them. She's not so clinical as to completely like, ignore him being a human being, but she doesn't have the sort of like temper that his father has. She offers him money. And while he does recognize that the money she offered was fair, it was a lot, that's not what he wants. This is something that was really difficult to find that he will likely never find again. And he points out that he put in the days of work and broke his arm. And finally, like they again fight about it for a minute. And he says something about how he's going to be going up against the kids because they're talking about, this competition that's coming up, and that there isn't even a guarantee, as old as he is, that he's going to beat the kids that he's up against. And if he doesn't, how shaming will that be to his family? Basically, he's trying to appeal to how ashamed of him they are, which is really rough, guys. That is depressing. But there it is. And Kelsa says, it's a poor gamble. We're betting on possible honor against certain shame. So basically she's agreeing that, yeah, we almost know that he's not going to beat these kids. Like, and she's being really dispassionate, but fair. but fair, always fair, you know? So they each eat their half of the fruit, and it sort of got this effect on both of them as if they have eaten something like electrified. They do not see, however, any immediate changes in themselves. His mother says to examine their cores, and then we get a little like primer on what that means. The core sat just beneath the navel and was where all the lines of Madra connected. This was the physical location of the soul, some said, and Lindon always pictured it as a rolling ball of blue-white light. So I imagine Madra as being the equivalent of chi, by the way. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what I keep thinking of. So he inhales and exhales and sort of like tries to sense if there's a change, but it doesn't seem like anything is different. And initially I thought maybe it didn't seem like that to him, but to his sister it would. But no, even she, with like, you know, her being at copper level, doesn't seem to sense anything different having happened. And he wasn't allowed to learn a path to harvest vital aura, so he would never advance. If he was lucky in his later years, his innate spirit would be refined to the point that he would naturally advance to copper, the state most people reached by age 13. Copper spirits were open to the vital aura of the natural world, so they could draw power from the heavens and earth to make themselves stronger. It was the true first step for any sacred arts. So that is your first indication that there are spirits of elements. Elements isn't even the right. Well, copper is an element, I guess. That you basically have to be able to sort of commune with or command. And that is what leads you to each of these levels. But yeah, we don't get more of that information yet. So, they get summoned in the middle of trying to decide if these fruits have done anything. He doesn't see a change. His sister doesn't seem to. And they are told to go and see the first elder. And it turns out that this is going to be Terrace getting his punishment handed out. And Terrace tells almost the whole truth. The one thing that he sort of lies about is he attempts to make it sound like he protected Lindon when he didn't really. He just happened to like get in the way of a blow, but he says that the thing had been going after Lindon, and likely not. It was going after him. Nevertheless, otherwise this is like a pretty accurate story. And the elder is interesting because the elder seems to really feel bad for Lindon. Like, seems to regret the necessity of the way Lindon is treated, and really tries to say to him, like, I want to help you, but my hands are tied in the way that we deal with this stuff and the restrictions that you know we have. And you are going to have to learn to consider that sort of thing and be a little bit more fucking careful, because you are out here trying to rest your life on hopes that somebody cares enough about their honor that they won't harm you. And there is no reason to think that's true. Even if he did harm you, it wouldn't really be that big a deal. I'd probably not be able to sentence him any more cruelly for that than what just went down here. So I found that interesting that the elder is like low-key feeling like he's on Lindon's side a little bit and like wants to give him tools, but he feels like Lindon's not really doing his part. You know, he's sort of like, you got to meet me halfway if you want to make it, buddy. And you're not doing that. And I'm not interested in investing time in you if you're not even going to use your head and the tools you already have to fucking defend yourself at all. Meanwhile, he tells Terrace that he's a fucking coward. And it's really something. He's just like, yeah, you're going to get whipped because that's what you get because you fucking ran. And we all know you ran, and it's pathetic, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Ugh. Whipped 3 times in front of the clan. Cowards have no place in the valley. And eventually, that is what happens. I kind of wondered if Lindon was going to like offer himself, and I didn't like, I was just like, would that do anything for his standing in the clan? Like, I wasn't sure how that would be taken or what, but it turns a very different corner. So eventually he's given his punishment, which is to feed Elder Whisper. And it's clear when he says this that Lindon does not see this as a punishment. It's not, this is his task that he has been given, but it is not onerous. And in fact, he's very interested and curious. But we will get there. I only have 5 minutes left. See, this is why I need to there's so much to cover when you start something new. I'm going to talk fairly briefly about the, let's see. From a distance, the clan was a collage of two colors, purple and white. Only one tower stood out, a needle of white so tall that it seemed thin, rising above the purple-roofed sea like the mast of a great ship. It was filled with stairs. There were only 2 rooms in the Whisper's Tower, one at the bottom and one at the top. So he goes in, and it turns out that this is where Elder Whisper lives. And Elder Whisper is a fox. He's 3 foxes. He's a mystery. He had joined the clan founders to create the Way clan, dominating the native remnants to carve out a section of wilderness in Sacred Valley. He had created the Path of the White Fox, the most common path in the entire clan, and used its powers to control and assimilate several lesser clans. Not even the current Way patriarch was as honored as Elder Whisper. I have no idea how this works, and I don't need to know yet. It's fine. But he is very interested in the fact that Whisper doesn't have spells on his door. It's just a regular big old heavy door, which he's just kind of like, why isn't it? Well, then what's the point of this giant device? It's just an interesting, because he's like expecting when he goes up there, clearly, for there to be all kinds of script written on it. But it's just a giant lock and key. And he's just like, what is this about? And I would love to know what that's about. Let's see. The inside of the door was covered by a scripted mirror. While the door was open, the circle was incomplete and Whisper could sneak out. If he did, he would find himself stuck on the stairs, unable to cross the closed circle at the tower's base. As far as Lindon knew, Whisper had never even tried to escape. He enjoyed a respected position, intervened in clan affairs as much as he wanted, and the elders released him from the tower on formal occasions. As a boy, Lindon had wondered why Whisper was trapped in the first place, but it was simply one more part of the way things were. I like that line. This is the kind of thing that, like, when you are seeing something from the outside, you of course are like, well, why? But that is such a true thing, that when you were born and raised in a situation with lots of other people who also accept the thing, you don't ask why. You will ask if your family does a thing that no other families do. But if there's something like that in the only community you have ever known, everyone accepts as just the way it is, it will often not occur to you to wonder, it's like, what's there? It's never been any other way. Why? It's like wondering, why is the sky blue? Like, you don't get to that sort of thing until you're way older. So he walks in and immediately Whisper's like, hey, what's up? I could tell you ate some of that fruit though. And he tells Whisper the truth of the story. And Whisper, to boil down his advice, is basically like, you are not on the path that other people have created for you. You know that. You haven't been given one of the badges. If there isn't a path, you can't just sit still. You have to make a path. You have to figure it out. And this is all Lindon needs to be told. before he gets pretty determined that he is going to figure it out. Like, it's funny to me that it hadn't occurred to him to try and make his own path. But again, Lindon is obviously somebody who accepts society as it is. He is not a person who colors outside the lines and tries to break rules. So while a part of me is like, dude, how did you not? Another part of me realizes that's not the way Lindon's brain works. He has to be told by an authority figure that it is okay to break away from authority figures before he can consider it, you know? And he says, fate is not fair, but it is just. Hard work is never in vain, even when it does not achieve what you wished. Which is one of those things that I really want to be true, and I'm not entirely sure I believe it, but, you know. And what happens here, because I have to wrap up since I am behind, and apologies, Andrew. He winds up with basically a challenge for a duel from the 10-year-old little sister, I think, of Terrace, because of Terrace being whipped. And it's clear that this is just sort of a ploy by Terrace's family to shift the attention of the clan from the shame of their son being whipped for being a coward. But it's nevertheless a very effective distraction. And Lindon has to answer in front of everyone. And he gives himself 7 days. He says 7 days from now. And then spends the rest of his time going through the archives and trying to find information on anything that he can do to process and cycle his Madra and increase his strength and ability without having had a access to what people with badges would have access to. Since he isn't on a regular path, he doesn't have the foundational education to be able to use a lot of what's in the archives. It's not going to, he just isn't able to manage it physically and spiritually. So he spends some time in the archives trying to find something, anything that can sort of help him out. And finally, he's looking around. He sees something under, a shelf that's towards the bottom that he has to kneel down. And there is a section, each of the book's divided into sections with bookmarks. And one of them says nothing on the label. And I mean the word nothing. The character for fire, the symbol for purification, yada, yada, yada. There was a section at the end of the bottom shelf with only one entry. The jade strip declaring its requirements said simply, none. Carefully, Lindon withdrew the book, examining the name of this technique, Heart of Twin Stars. And that is the end of chapter 4. So this is hopefully something that is going to keep him from getting his ass handed to him by a 10-year-old girl. Listen, I want him to win, but also that 10-year-old girl kind of sounds like a badass, and I'm not mad at her, is what I'm saying. All right, I have to wrap this up, but thank you very much to Andrew for commissioning this episode. I hope that you enjoyed the first episode of coverage, and if you're reading along with me, guys, let me know. I always like hearing when people are doing that. So, all right, y'all, I will be seeing you again pretty soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.